Good morning, Discover. Hope you are doing well wherever you are today. So this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So let's sing together. Heaven thundered and the world was born. Life begins and ends in the dust you form. Faith commanded and the mountains moved. Fear is losing ground to our hope in you. Unstoppable God, unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Freedom conquered, all our chains undone. Sin defeated, Jesus has overcome. Mercy triumphed when the third day dawned. Darkness was denied when the stone was rolled. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Sing unstoppable God. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done.
You so much for the opportunities that you pour out on us to just gather in your name. Most of all, I thank you that, as that song says, you are unstoppable. And I just praise you that you're better than the post office. Neither rain nor snow nor sleet nor anything can stop you, Lord God. And I just thank you that this morning, as we are breaking out of the snow and the cold, I just am so grateful, Lord, that you have so much to impart upon our lives, no matter what the external circumstances are. And I just pray this morning that we would be blown over and be just amazed by what you have to show us today. God, I pray these things in your name. Amen. Well, hey, to those of you in the room, I'm glad you braved the cold. It's warming up now. It's not that bad. But I'm glad that you're here and that you are locked in. I want to encourage you in just a second. We're going to have just a little time before I come back up and start talking to grab something to eat. If you didn't already, grab a donut, grab a cup of coffee, warm your coffee up, whatever. But say hello to somebody around beside you. And if you're watching online, glad you found us. Take this minute also to grab some coffee or something. Just get settled in before we jump into today's talk on the book of Daniel. Let's do that now. Say hello to somebody around you. Today, we are going to talk about one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible. And it's the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We are in this series that we just started last week called All Good Down Here. We're taking a look at the book of Daniel. And specifically, as we get into Daniel, we're talking about God, Daniel, and rational fears. And again, I just want to be, I'm so glad you're here. I really am. And if you are watching this, whether you're watching it live or you're watching this at some other point, maybe you saw this like live when we did it and you're coming back to this sometime in the future because of the subject matter. I want you to know I am so excited to teach this to you today. This material is, it has been so surprising to me. And particularly, it's been surprising because this is a story, as I said, that I love. This is a story that I've known for a long, long time. I regaled Cindy this week. We were walking, and I started singing to her, and she said, "Do not sing that on Sunday morning." So I will not sing it. But when I was I think 10 years old in the junior choir at First Baptist Church of Grass Valley, we did a children's musical on this particular biblical story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The musical was called "It Isn't Hot in the Furnace, Man, It Isn't Hot." And then the subline would be, "It's cool." And you probably, see, she's like, "You might as well have sung it," she said in the front. But you can actually still find it on YouTube. I found it on YouTube, and I sent a link to her. Not me singing it, but you can find the song. And I sent it to Cindy at work, and she's like, "Stop bugging me." But it's a great, great story. You remember last week we talked about how the circumstances and the situation got set up in Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar was the king in Babylon in about, Jeremy and I were just talking about this, roughly about 615 BC through about 590 BC. And he was perhaps the greatest ruler that Babylon ever knew. And again, just for you geopolitical nerds, some of you who have studied some history may remember that when the Gulf War was raging and when we were first sending our troops into Iraq, that Saddam Hussein envisioned himself at being the second coming of Nebuchadnezzar. And as you went into the main drag, the main street, the main artery into Baghdad leading up to the palace, he had erected these massive golden hands on either side of this four-lane road that held these two sabers that crisscross. And that statuary was an homage to the great ancient Babylonian Empire from which, modern-day Iraq traces its lineage to. And so when we look at Nebuchadnezzar and we look at these stories and things, I keep using the word story this morning. You get into this and you think, oh, that's awesome. But obviously that's a story. Obviously, this is one of those places in the scripture where we're looking at an allegory, where God is trying to use, crazy images to teach us a valuable lesson. Well, the crazy thing is that it's not a story. It is an historical account, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that I discovered this week, which is awesome. But even going through all of those things and seeing the reality of the story and being, kind of re-familiarized with the things, some of the stuff that I feel like God dropped on me in the prep for this message just really astounded me. And I want you to know where this talk is going to end up going is not where I initially envisioned it going. God sort of said, "Scott, let me show you something really amazing. And I'm excited to share it with you today. And I think it's going to hopefully be something that God uses for all of us today, but even beyond today, that it's something we can come back to as we go on the rest of our lives and be reminded of just what God likes to do in his kingdom with you and me. So I'm looking forward to this very much. Let's jump into it. So last week, talked about Nebuchadnezzar sacked Israel, or sacked Judah. Israel was in shambles at that time. Israel and Judah had split into two kingdoms. Judah was the stronger one to the north and had been, both had been living very outside of the direction that Jehovah God wanted them to be leading their lives and leading their kingdom. And God had been telling his people for a significant period of time, hey, I'm giving you fair warning. You are asking for life apart from me. And you guys don't get what you're asking for. You need to pull it up here. And if you don't pull it up here, I'm going to give you what you're asking for. I'm going to step back. And when that happens, you will see just how much the world hates you. And quite literally, you'll be dragged off. And the Babylonians were such a crazy group for God to say, let me tap you to be my accomplice in what the lesson that I want to teach to my people. Because the Babylonians, man, they were not what you would call a God-fearing people. They were not towing the sort of moral line that the Jewish folks would look at and say, here's how life should be lived. Even when the Jewish folks were living in open rebellion to God, they still kind of had a line that they would draw in the sand, and the Babylonians lived way on the other side of that line. So in their minds, when God would come along and say, guys, I'm warning you, the last thing they ever thought that they would ever need to worry about would be the Babylonians, because the Babylonians were such we'll say a different kind of moral group from the Jewish people, from the Hebrews, right? I mean, the Babylonians, they were into like capital punishment and all kinds of crazy things. They were into slavery. They were into indentured servanthood. And that's not even talking about some of their, other things that they would do morally speaking. As we picked up the story last week, though, we saw where that's exactly what God did. God gave them over. And Nebuchadnezzar, who really wanted to get at the Egyptians and saw the people of God living in the Holy Land as just a speed bump on his way from Babylon down to Egypt, he sacked them. And he said to his people, his rulers, his authorities, I want you to do an inventory, a people inventory. I want you to go through and I want you to find the brightest young people that you can. And I want to draft those young people and make sure also, if you can, that you get people that are from important households. Because if we take the young people from the important households that have influence, that'll keep them in line. We don't have to leave behind as big a military presence to keep control if we've got their kids. And so we'll take their kids over, and then what we're going to do is we're going to build them up. We're going to develop them. We're going to train them. We're going to brainwash them, really, into making them Babylonians. They'll serve in our court. And again, that will keep the people back home subdued, because their kids following along. Their kids not only with us, but their kids one of us. So that was the thinking. And they pulled these 4 guys. We remember Daniel by his Hebrew name. We remember the other 3 by their Babylonian names, which is kind of funny. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those are their Babylonian names. But they pulled them all away. And we read last week how they said, we talked about this whole idea of being in the world, but not of the world. And they looked at their Babylonian captivity and the opportunity that they were being given to really not be in captivity at all, but to be living on easy street and to be, eating the good, choice, fatty foods and drinking all the wine they wanted from the king's table. And they saw that it was more than just meat and wine versus vegetables. They saw it really as a compromise of their character and a compromise of their beliefs, a capitulation to the culture of this world. And they said, we won't do that. We're going to, even if we have to pay a price, we're going to toe the line. And God honored that choice. And not only were those 4 guys able to eat their own diet, but they succeeded, and they were lauded by the Babylonians for how smart they were, how good they were. And they were all given real plum choice assignments when their 3-year training period came to an end. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they got plugged in as key officials throughout the Babylonian provinces. Daniel, he got stuck, and we'll come back to Daniel next week. I say stuck, but really he got promoted within the capital city and within the court of Nebuchadnezzar. So he kind of did the best. But the other 3 boys, they did pretty good too. So they get put into positions of authority. Matter of fact, into such good positions of authority that some of the other Babylonian leaders that had been around for a long time actually started to get jealous and look at those 3 guys and say, oh, come on. First, they're not even Babylonians. They're these crazy Jews who've got all these weird beliefs. And then on top of that, they're young. They're green. They don't know anything. Why in the world did these guys get stuck in this position? So this is kind of the mentality with which they are getting their careers off the ground. And as their career gets going off the ground, a crazy thing happens. Nebuchadnezzar, when the story begins, when the historical account begins, I should say, Nebuchadnezzar is a guy who, as a leader, has never known defeat. He has looked on the world and he has pretty much been able to capture whatever it is that he wanted. And he's looking at himself saying, I am the most significant, most important human being on the planet. I can do whatever I want. And matter of fact, I can snap my fingers and just tell people to stand up, to jump. And he decides in that kind of a vein to do something really bizarre. He, to kind of both flaunt his power and his wealth, builds this big golden kind of, we would call it a statue, but it was an idol. And it was a monument to Nebuchadnezzar. It was a monument to his power. It was a monument to his authority throughout the entirety of the Babylonian Empire. And he passed the law. And he said, here's what I want all of the Babylonian Empire to do. When they hear any kind of musical explosion of sound, they need to bow down. Even if they can't see the golden idol, they need to bow down figuratively to that golden idol. They need to pay homage to it, to me, to us. They hear, musical strumming on a harp or a lyre, if they hear some congos or bongos, if they hear any kind of musical instrument, they got to bow down and proclaim that I am supreme and I am sovereign. To that, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they kind of conferred with each other. They weren't like living together anymore, but they were still in close proximity to each other. And they said, what are you going to do about this? And they all made this decision that, hey, we've honored God to this point. Even, we ran the risk of kind of running afoul of, the Babylonian power structure. And we've been okay honoring God. Matter of fact, we could argue that God has blessed us because we honored him. Let's keep that up. Let's keep doing that. So we pick up the story, what happens when all of a sudden the musical instruments start getting played throughout Babylon, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego all make a stand to say, nope, we're not bowing down to that because that's not right. We only bow down to Jehovah God. We only honor him. We'll follow the king. We'll follow his rules. We'll even, help administer his rules. But he's our king. God is our Lord. We're in this world, but we're not of this world. So we're not bound down to it. At this, it all kind of begins to fall apart. Let me take you into the 3rd chapter of Daniel, the 7th to the 12th verses. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the peoples, nations, and men of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. You have issued a decree, O king, that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, pipes, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold. And whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews who you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who pay no attention to you, O king. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. So we have this scene of these astrologers getting ticked off, getting kind of jealous, and going back to Nebuchadnezzar and saying, hey, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. So since they're not doing what they're supposed to do, which is disrespectful to you, it's causing us to be distracted. It's got to be causing the Babylonian people to be distracted from your authority and your rule. Something needs to be done. And the something that needs to be done is these three guys need to be thrown into the fiery furnace, which is the song that I did not sing to you at the beginning of the service here, right? And you probably know something of the story of what's happening and what's going to take place. I got to tell you, as a grown man who looks back on my fondness for that little childhood musical, and I remember we built a furnace out of paper mache on the stage at the church, and we danced in it, and it had, little red crepe paper and orange crepe paper and yellow crepe paper with a fan underneath that was blowing it, so the paper would kind of do this and stuff, and we kind of, it isn't hot in the furnace and stuff. You look at all of those pictures and those images in your mind, and you sort of think, this is good, this is great, but going back to how I set this whole thing up, it's not hard in 2025 to think about what we've got going in our lives and think, yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a good lesson that comes out of all of this, but did these three guys really exist? And honestly, did these three guys get thrown into some kind of a strange, large pizza oven? I mean, how would such a thing really play itself out and really exist? And the temptation these days is because we don't have that kind of apparatus laying around to think, yeah, it probably didn't happen. I mean, it's like the whole Red Sea, Reed Sea thing that I've talked to you about before, right? Did the Israelites really go through the Red Sea, and was it really parted, and was it really, the walls of water and stuff? Or did they walk through the Reed Sea, which is another one that was kind of nearby that was only knee deep, I mean, it's probably a rational explanation that would get rid of the miraculous aspect of all of this stuff, right? Well, here's the crazy thing. You could, right now, well, maybe not right now, but sometime today, you could drive up to the Tulsa airport, buy yourself a plane ticket, and end up in the next however many hours it would take you over in London, England. And you could go to the British Royal Museum of Archaeology. And you could walk into that museum and find this thing right here. It is a cuneiform that has been carbon dated. It's been verified that it was made somewhere between the year of 600 and 610 BC. It is not a biblical text. It is, though, written in Babylonian. And the text inscribed on this cuneiform tablet outlines specifically some of the Babylonian law dealing with evil people and what the Babylonians would do. Let me read to you, translated from Babylonian, up what that little passage up there inscribed on the rock says in English. Now you, Enel Nadin Sunni, which is a terminology for a king's official, in the presence of divinity, on account of evil behavior, burn them, roast them in the kiln. Here you have a piece of historical, archaeological evidence outside of the Bible that describes how the Babylonian Empire, in the exact time in which the book of Daniel is dated, during the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar, took care of people who were bad guys. They roasted them, according to this, and also according to this, in large kilns. Now you think, that's have to be a pretty big kiln. Why would they do that? Why would they do such a thing? Well, while you're over in England, while you're in the Royal British Archaeological Museum, why don't you also walk over and see the display that they have set up on King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar is, in fact, a real guy, or was a real guy. And he was a real guy who had a real affection for architecture, loved it, loved what he got to build. And the reason we know this is because there were building materials that got left behind from Nebuchadnezzar's reign. Somewhere, somehow, Nebuchadnezzar found out that brick was a fantastic building material. And with some of the amazing things that he built that survived, he started doing all kinds of masonry and brickwork. There were over 12 million bricks that were made, royal bricks, by Nebuchadnezzar. And we, the British, have some of those bricks still sitting around. You might not be able to see this. I'm going to walk over here. But right here in the middle of this brick is a bunch of that Babylonian, chiseled lettering. That brick has been translated to say, I, Nebuchadnezzar, son of whatever his father's name was, it's hard to pronounce, am the builder of great things in Babylon. He marked all of his bricks, those 12 million bricks. Now, how did he make those 12 million bricks? He made them in a row of large kilns that were outside of the citadel. Again, you might think, oh, this story is so silly. It's just a fanciful little story. I mean, there's not big fire kilns laying around that they throw people in. Yeah, the history says that there were. So as you ponder that and you start thinking about what we just read, you now have some historical nuggets that kind of hopefully boost the sense of faith that you have as you read this story. But then you also just think about human nature. What do you know? You know because no doubt at some time in your lives you have faced people who were jealous of you. Maybe you had a job that they wanted. Maybe you had a boyfriend or girlfriend that they wanted. Maybe you had money that they wanted. You've had something, maybe this was way back when, or maybe it's been real recent. But you've dealt with people before who were jealous of you and who were willing to say, you know what, I don't really care what happens to you. If I can get what you've got that I want, then I don't care. I will do whatever it takes to get that. And if you lose everything, up to including your life, so be it. You've probably encountered, to some degree, some level of jealousy directed at you before. So as you read the story about these astrologers thinking, this is not fair. I've been working hard for a lot longer than these three little Jewish boys, man, and now all of a sudden they've got this position, this heightened position. If they did something that I could use to my advantage, by all means, I'm going to go for it. You've experienced something like that. So you start putting all these pieces together and you start seeing the validity of this account that we're reading that's so much more than a story. So those astrologers, they went to the king. What did the king do? Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now, when you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, the pipes, all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Okay, just stopping right there. We know that Daniel is the one that transcribed this. We will in the coming weeks see Daniel's course. We will see, who he was and what role he played with Nebuchadnezzar. But right here, he is describing the moment that took place between his three childhood friends that have come with him on this journey and this moment. And he's making it very clear to us that Nebuchadnezzar, at first, his feathers were ruffled, but he was like, come on, boys, play ball here. Come on. You want to change, right? I'm going to give you the chance to correct your course and get on my program. Fall down, get on your knees, worship the world that I put in front of you, get down and pay homage to the great golden idol, and it'll all be good. But if you don't, I'm going to drop the hammer. And you know what the hammer is here in Babylon. I'm going to throw you into the fiery furnace. Now, you obviously don't want that. That's crazy. We don't want to burn you. We throw the murderers in there. We throw the really bad moral people. And when we think it's bad in Babylonian morality, they've got to be really bad. That's what we do. But we wrote this law, and you guys are leaders. I can't have you as leaders leading the people away from what I have said is the high law about worshiping me. So come on, get it right. Get it right. Go back to Easy Street. Be of, not just in. Right? You see that there? But what happens? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to save us from it, and he will rescue us from your hand, O king. But even if he does not, we want you to know, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Again, stopping. They say, no, we want to be faithful. We like our jobs. We want to be good employees of yours. but we're not going to compromise our character. We're not going to betray our devotion to God in order to make things good with you. So, no, we're not going to do it. Text says, then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He was already angry. Now he's off the charts mad. And his attitude toward them, it says, changed. So going from, come on, guys, it's not like, how dare you not do what I've given you the chance to do? How dare you be this disrespectful? I'm going to bring down the full force and hammer now of my might and my power, and I'm going to annihilate you because I am Nebuchadnezzar, and I am king of the world. So here we go, buddy. You're going to melt now under my power. It says up there, take a look. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. Now, what does this mean? It means they have a prescription. They know to make those bricks, this is how hot it needs to be. We know if we get it, not as hot as this brick burning level, that the bricks won't have the right consistency, they'll fall apart. We know that if we go too hot, though, we'll melt them and the bricks won't work. So we've got a happy spot that we keep these things going to make sure that the bricks get, all they need. That heat level is enough to kill somebody who gets thrown in there, okay, right? But Nebuchadnezzar says, forget it. You guys start stoking the fire. And they literally had the big air flumes that would go into these things at the bottom. They said, start, pumping the air pumps, the air bladders to really get that fire raging, to make it just blazing hot. And it's going to get, to this level that's been approximated at 7 times the heat intensity that it would normally be fired at to fire bricks, okay? We're talking blazing hot. How hot is that? Well, it says he commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and to throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, being Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, wearing their robes, their trousers, their turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. So you get the picture here. You get the idea. This thing is so blazing hot that the guys that are, the big strong soldiers that have tied them up real tight, that carry them up and then throw them in, into the kiln. Those guys, just the heat, the intensity of the heat, they die from it. They die from it. We're seeing these images right now on TV, right, of all of this devastation happening, these fires in California, right? And you sort of have this idea, this picture. Imagine the intensity of the blaze that would have to be so hot that just the guys getting close enough to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in actually would die from that exposure. It's insane heat. And they're all thrown in. Daniel makes the point, because he's a really good detail guy, at saying, here's what they're wearing, and they're all bound up with ropes. So they're going in like this, landing on the ground, right? All tied up, thrown in, boom, there you go. Crazy thing, though. Text keeps going. The king Nebuchadnezzar, it says, then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, O king. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound, unharmed. And the 4th looks like a son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the royal advisors crowded around them. They saw the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes were not scorched. There was not even a smell of fire on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command, and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save this way. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Cool story, huh? Who's it about? It's about God. Yeah, it's about God. He's certainly focal, central in that story. Who else, if you hear that story, would you think it's about? I mean, the song, Isn't It Hot in the Furnace, is about who? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Most people, I think, would read that story. I know I have read that story historically in my life and said, it's either about God and his power. He's clearly, if there's lots of theological argument that the fourth person is Jesus. There's other argument that it's one of God's angels. Maybe it's the messenger angel who kind of embodied his voice throughout the Old Testament. But it's certainly somebody from God who's gone in, who's not only untied the ropes, not only surrounded them with his power and his protection, but, also his fireproofing. Can you imagine? Not even the clothes smelled, right? I mean, it's crazy. But you know what? It dawned on me this week that this is not just about God. And it's not even about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. This story is actually about Nebuchadnezzar. When you start the book of Daniel, I don't know if you noticed, I mentioned at the beginning, I don't know if you noticed any of the references on there. This is Daniel chapter 3. We started last week in Daniel chapter 1. You've been with me for a long time. You guys in the room. I don't know about you watching. Most of you probably have too. You know that typically a text like this, I'll start with Daniel 1, and then I'll go to Daniel 2, and then Daniel 3, and Daniel 4, and Daniel 5. I decided when putting this together that I needed to do this first. Because when you read the book of Daniel, written by Daniel, who talks about, yes, his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but also talks a lot about Daniel, that you make this assumption that, hey, these guys, the fiery den, we're going to get the the fiery furnace, we're going to get the lion's den pretty soon at some point too. The key central figure in a lot of this stuff, the adversary, the bad guy, is Nebuchadnezzar. And you just think of him as such. You tend, though, to think that the stories are about the heroes, right? I mean, you don't go to a movie called Lex Luthor, right? You go to a movie called Superman. You don't go to a movie, well, now you do go to a movie called The Joker, but you know what I mean? You typically go to a movie that focuses on the hero, not the bad guy. Because it's the hero that does the heroic things. It's the hero who does, all the good stuff. In this case, you could definitely argue that the heroes of the story are God or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they towed the line, they did what they were supposed to do, even at the possible expense of their lives. And they were honored, for doing so, and they survived. So you could certainly say they were the heroes. But if you want to say, who was the story about? It's really, I think, about Nebuchadnezzar. And if I looked at this thing today, this message today, and I gave it a title, the title for this would be this: Your Trial, Somebody Else's Redemption. The thing that's interesting about this is the arc that we're going to see in the coming days, in the coming weeks, as we go through the rest of this book, and we see what happens with Daniel, and we see what happens with Babylon, and we see what happens with Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar starts the arc of all of this off in a place where he doesn't think he needs anybody. He looks at the world around him and he goes, I am the ultimate self-made man. Yes, I got my throne because my father was on it before me, but you know what? I've done things with it that he never could do. And he gets told by Daniel via God that there won't be anybody that comes after him that can even match what he has done. So he starts this story thinking, it's me. I am the king of the universe. I don't need any of you, and I certainly don't need you. Somehow, some way, though, as we get through it, we see Nebuchadnezzar come full circle. At some point, he looks up and says, you are the great God. Now here, he's thinking, oh, I need to be respectful. You've got some power with your God that I've not encountered before, so I'm going to keep some healthy distance on it. But that's a whole different thing from saying, God, I submit myself to you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to get in that fiery furnace so that as part of the journey that Nebuchadnezzar would need, not exclusively, that was just a part of it, that they would need for Nebuchadnezzar to get where he was going. You know how many more times we read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego after this? 0. They disappear. They're kind of like, if you know literary, they're kind of like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, with Shakespeare. They're these important key figures until they're not, and then they're gone. What happened to them? I don't know. Nobody knows. Can't wait to get to heaven and find out. So what happened to you guys, right? But they played a part to this one. And it was a part that frankly was not fun. It was not cool. It was hot in the furnace, right? It was tragic even. They could have died. Other people did die. So what in the world? Here's the thing. How long have you been a follower of Jesus Christ? I've been a follower of Jesus Christ for, almost 50 years, because I'm 54, and I did it when I was a little kid, so 40-something years, right? It's been a long time, and there have been a lot of things, a lot of good moments that I've gotten following God. The problem for Scott Owens, and maybe I am the only one who can say this, who's in the room or who's even watching online, the problem I've had is that so many times I have let my faith, my relationship with Jesus, and don't call it faith, that's not enough. My relationship with Jesus come to be a place where it becomes transactional. Hey, God, I need you to do these things. I'll behave, I'll be this, I'll be that, if you do this sort of stuff. And not only that, just to put it out there, my worship of God, my submission to come before him and say, God, you are first. God, you are worthy. God, you get everything. So many times is about if it's convenient, is about if I feel like it's warranted, about if I feel like that, man, it isn't hot in the furnace, right? I've been delivered. So, hey, great. God, you're awesome. You're amazing. You're good. That's kind of where American 21st century Christianity is these days. We're about Jesus, we're for Jesus, as long as Jesus is clearly for us. But what happens when we start picking up the text and we see where our God would say to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you know what, boys? I need you to get in the furnace. I'm not going to show up beforehand. They had no guarantee that he was going to show up inside. Remember, that's why they said, even if our God doesn't show up, we're still not going to bow down and worship you. Because the faith that we have is in a God, the relationship that we have is in a God who does not go quid pro quo. The relationship that we have is with a God who is almighty, who is worthy of our worship, not, getting a kickback from us because he did X, Y, Z for us, but because he is the almighty one. Too many times these days, that's not what we're doing. And I believe the big thing that God was trying to show, and not just in this one, but in some other places, the big thing that God was trying to remind us as we hopefully mature and grow in our faith is, it's not about us. It's not about us. And sometimes it's not about us to the point that it's even going to be, there's going to be trials that come our way that we go, this is not cool. This is not fun. This is not even fair. What did I do to deserve this? And the truth is, we all have done plenty to deserve far worse than what we're experiencing. But in the moment, when our toe is stubbed, in the moment when our bank account is not where it needs to be, in the moment where the job didn't come through, in the moment where we experienced loss or heartache, we're going, God, this isn't fair. How dare you do this to me? And the crazy thing is the more we begin to know and understand God, the answer may be coming from God. I'm doing something right now through your trial that frankly is not about you. There is something that I need to do in the building up of my kingdom with somebody else that you're rubbing shoulders with that you're not even seeing right now, that you're not even noticing right now. And it will be through your trial that they see me. That's a big move for us to grasp and understand that that's the way our God works. And it's an even bigger move for us to get to this point where we say, God, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did, even if you don't show up, I am willing to be your follower. I'm willing to allow you to do your thing, to be sovereign in my life to the point where my trial might be your victorious tool that you use to bring about triumph in someone else's life. You remember another great Old Testament story, the one of Jonah? Remember the guy who got swallowed by the big fish? The reason he got swallowed by the big fish was because God said, I want you to go to this place called Nineveh, which was an even worse town than the Babylonian places were. And he said, I want you to go to Nineveh and I want you to preach to them that they need to turn toward me. Otherwise, it's going to go bad for them for the rest of forever. And Jonah's like, I'm not going there. They'll kill me. Besides, they deserve it, to be honest with you, God. And God says, no, you need to go. And so he says, matter of fact, I'm not only going to not go, I'm going to go as far the other direction as I can. And that's where the big fish came in, and then he gets, swallowed up, and then he gets barfed out onto the seashore, and finally says, I smell like puke, fish puke, pretty gross, but fine, God, I'll go. And he says, they're not going to listen, but I'll go. And he goes, and he says, I know you're not going to listen, but hey, you guys all need Jehovah God. Okay, throw your rocks. And they're like, what? We need Jehovah God? Tell us more. And he's like, what? And so he says, well, you need to turn the way you're living your lives, and you need God. They're not going to listen to this God. They're not going to listen to this. They need you, God. You need God. They go, okay, well, tell us how. We do. We need God. And instead of being thrilled and going, wow, that's awesome, you know what Jonah does? Jonah's like, are you kidding? I smell like fish guts. I've had all of this horrible stuff. This is lousy. Blow them up, God. Blow them up. You're not going to blow them up, are you, God? Ah. And then this great scene happens. In the book of Jonah, this is Jonah chapter 4. It says, Jonah was greatly displeased and became angry. He prayed to the Lord, oh, Lord, is this not what I said when I was still at home? This is why I was so quick to flee to the other direction, to Tarshish. I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Well, now, O Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live. So here you get him. He is literally so ticked off that God's going to save all of these bad, ugly people, and that God has used him to do so. He's like, God, I'm so miserable about this. I'm so miserable that you were right in this. I'm so miserable that just you're going to be good to these people that deserve bad on them. Just kill me. I don't even want to keep going. I just want to do anything. It says, but the Lord replied, have you any right to be angry? And so then Jonah storms off. And the text says to us that he goes and he just sits up above the city. And he just is like, come on, God, just blow it up. Just blow it up. And it's really hot out there. And says that God literally, to try to give Jonah just some perspective, a break, literally causes this little vine as he's sitting there to start growing up behind him. And this little vine, it grows super, super fast. And it grows up and this kind of leaf sort of leaps out above his head. And it provides some shade from the sun. So for a split second, Jonah's like, ah. But then the vine just literally crumbles under the sun and falls away. So Jonah's mad again. The text says, God said to Jonah, do you have any right to be angry about that vine? I do, he said. I am angry enough to die. But the Lord said, you've been concerned about the vine, though you did not tend to it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight, and it's died overnight. But Nineveh, the city that he has come to, has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Should I not be concerned about that great city? Jonah was like a lot of us, saying, I'm going to measure balls and strikes, feet and inches, what I think is fair or not fair, based on my perspective of things. I'm even going to look at this vine, which God gave him to say, fine, if you need a minute to compose yourself, sit here and let me give you that minute. But that was not Jonah's moment or plan. Jonah was like, I'm going to sit right here and I'm going to stew in my anger underneath this little vine. He didn't even get the moment that God was trying to give him to say, compose yourself, get the perspective. We're saving hundreds of thousands of people right now, Jonah. I've tapped you. I've given you the chance to go through these trials. Why? So that, yes, not only might you be made more solid and strong, but so that all of these hundreds of thousands of people might hear my message. This is good stuff, Jonah. See it. And Jonah instead is so warped, frankly, by being not just in, but of the world that he's been living in. That even though he's a follower of Jehovah, he can't be. He just wants to sit under that vine and stew in his anger. And when the vine blows up, God's like, what are you still doing here? I gave you that vine to collect yourself, to compose yourself, to give you that moment to get the perspective that you needed on what I was doing. You should have worshiped me in that moment and allowed me to rechange your batteries, your system, your view, your vision to the fact that I have used your trial to be their redemption. But instead, you stayed here curled up and you kept saying, it's not fair, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not right, it's not fair, it's not right. Past that moment, you stewed in it. And now that moment's gone. That moment's lost. Just like the vine is gone, Jonah, Scott, you, get out of here. Get up and walk. Leave the place of the trial and move on. Because I have not abandoned you. I didn't bring you into this trial, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, for the fire to consume you. For I am the Lord your God. I'm going to walk in the fire with you. I'm going to pull the ropes off of you. Might you get a little warm in there? Yeah. Might it be unpleasant, uncomfortable? Yeah, it might. There's not going to be a little beach boy that's going to come along and bring you a drink in the furnace. But you know what? Stay with me, and you'll be delivered. That's the promise that we have in Jesus. He's with us in the trial. But we don't stay in the squalor. We let him pick us up and we move on. We look and we say that God is doing something sometimes beyond what I have the capacity to see. And he might even be using me in this moment to build his kingdom. So, God, be my Lord. Be my leader. Guide me and direct me to something more. And this is a big step for so many of us living in 2025. So many of us as Christians are wanting to say, man, I don't like where it is. This is lousy. I don't want those out there who don't agree with me or who I disagree with to get ahead. I want them to be punished. I want them to have their houses burned down. Yeah, do it, God, do it. My life is lousy. I just wish my life would just, whatever. And God's come along to us saying, no. Matter of fact, you don't even get this. But they're seeing what's happening with you. And there's a transformation happening. In the New Testament, Paul talks about this. In the book of 2 Corinthians, and maybe some of you will remember the song that we sing sometimes. We were going to sing this song this morning before all the ice stuff happened and the band couldn't make it here this morning. But let me share this text. It's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verses 5 through 12. For we do not preach ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ. And let me stop right there. What that verse is saying, that might be hard for you to understand. What that verse is saying is, it's not about us, it's about him. And the song, the light that gets radiated from us shouldn't be how good we are or how bad we are, about what our trials are or what our victories are. It should all be God. It should all be God. It should all be a reflection of who he is. That reflection should renew us, recharge us, refresh us, but it should also be able to be not trampled on by us, but be used to reflect God's glory and greatness, his redemptive power to the world around us. The text goes back, it says, but we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. And I love this. You guys there was a band that existed a long time ago called the Jars of Clay. And it was a weird name. And I remember thinking, what's this about? And the whole idea comes from this scripture passage. A jar of clay, if you drop it, guess what happens? It breaks, right? But then again, a jar of clay, its value comes not from its beauty. Its value comes not from its sustenance. Its value comes from what's inside it. The jar that gets filled with the power of God, even though it's a jar of clay, is a precious and wonderful thing. And when you and I say, that's all I want to be, God, I want to be your jar of clay that you use to administer your grace to the world, then I have great value, you have great value, not because of our existence, but because of his presence within us. Does that make sense? So that's what we are. It says, but we have this treasure to show this all-surpassing powers from God, not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side. I mean, you'll hear Jake's words right now. You'll hear him singing this. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed. We always carry around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be also revealed in our body. To who? To us? Yes, but to the world around us. For we who are alive are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake, so that his life may be revealed in our mortal body. So then death is at work in us, but life is at work in you. Our trial, but somebody else's deliverance. somebody else's redemption, somebody else's new life. And in that process, God makes us new again. The persecution that comes, the pressure that comes, it makes diamonds. It makes pearls. It makes precious gold. It makes wonder. The clay becomes valuable because of God in us. Valuable to us, yes, but it's not about us. Valuable to others. Their redemption through our trial comes all the way full circle and becomes our redemption. Don't cheat the process. Don't cheat the Christianity. Don't cheat the relationship. Don't, because you are in this world, demand that your Christianity act like it's in this world. Don't be of this world. Be of the kingdom of God. Be of his glory. And let that full process be something that he is able to take and use in your life, but in others. By saying, God, I lay it all down before you, for you, about you, because of you. I had a chance to talk this week to my friend out in California. His name is Mark Nunn. I started a church with him back in California a long time ago. And he actually now is at the church that I grew up in. And he and I talked on Thursday. And he's like, what are you talking on this weekend? So I was telling him about some of the stuff. He goes, man, this is so funny you are talking about that. I said, why? He goes, because I'm feeling convicted. I said, really? He said, yeah, you know what God did this week? It's crazy. I said, what did God do? He said, well, God didn't make the first part happen, but he certainly used it. I said, okay, get to it, Mark. He said, we had a big storm. I said, oh, yeah, we did too. He goes, in my storm, he says, I got this big pine tree that's grown over my driveway. And he said, my wife, Kathy, she came in, she said, Mark, come outside. He's like, what? He went out. The branch had fallen down and fallen across the top of their car and done significant damage. And he said, we have a sun moonroof thing on the top of the car. He said, I had no idea. That pressurized kind of tempered glass, when it breaks, he said, it's bad. It just goes everywhere. And he said, I thought I could probably drive the car. I called the insurance. They said, we can get to it later this week. So you'll have to drive it if you can drive it, until we do that. He said, okay. He said, so I got out and I started vacuuming out the glass. And he said, it was loud. And it was just, he said, I was so mad. I was so upset. And I was just like, man, why did this have to happen? This is so. And he says, Kathy came out and she was talking to me and, trying to cheer me up. And he said, then there's this neighbor across the street. And we've invited this neighbor to come to church before, but they've never been interested in coming before. And we have maybe said 3 words to them since then. He said, I'm out there belly aching about this chore that I've got to do and how it's going to affect my insurance and how it's going to be just a pain in my rear end for the rest of the week. And this neighbor comes out and says, what happened? Oh, no, we heard it. Oh, my goodness. And this happened. Da, 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 da. He said, that lady, she sat there and she talked to Kathy for about 45 minutes, and they're going to come to church this weekend. Can you believe that? And he said, when Kathy invited her, I'm like, what are you doing? As I'm vacuuming up all the glass. And then when she said, yeah, we'd come, I'm like, God, did you have to break my moon roof in order for this lady to come to church? He said, but then I realized we'd invited her before. We invited her to come to Christmas. It's a lot of fun. She wasn't interested. But something about her feeling connected to us because she heard the tree fall on our car made her want to come out and have an openness and a receptivity. And Kathy, Kathy wasn't going to talk to her about life and everything else, and Jesus had that branch not fallen. And now I'm realizing you're talking about this. I said, Mark, that's it. That's how God does this. That's it. Can I tell your story? Because people will get it if I tell your story at the end. He goes, yeah, tell him my story. So, I'm sorry that Mark's window's busted, but isn't that cool for us? Be in, not of. Let your trial be a moment, but recognize no matter how much you're persecuted, you're not going to be crushed, because the God of angel armies is on your side. But just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, but even if he doesn't show up, I'm still going to be about him, because he has always been about me. And even if he doesn't give me one more thing for the rest of my existence, he's already given me so much that I will be about him. I'll let my trial be whatever he needs it to be. The evidence is pretty good that he's not going to abandon you in that moment. The evidence is pretty good, according to Scripture, that he's going to continue to be your God. But give him the chance to be even more than your deliverer. Give him the chance to be a God who goes and gets and rescues somebody else through what you're going through. Pray with me. Father God, I pray this morning, this is heavy duty stuff, and I know there's so much going on, and I know there's so many just things happening in our world, I just pray that we would let you be sovereign and we would trust you in everything. Even to the point of saying, God, we will just take the moment that we need to compose ourselves in our trial, but then we're not going to stay and stew in it like Jonah did. We're going to stand up, brush the sand off, and allow you to move us on to the next place, because you are about the work of redemption, ours and the world around us. God, I pray that we would be like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and just say, no, throw us in there. It doesn't matter. We're for God. We may be in, but we will not be of this world. And God, I just pray that you would do a mighty work, that you would save not only us, but that you would remind us that it's not about us. It's about your kingdom. It's about what you're doing, and that we would trust you to do something amazing. That we would be faithful to you even when it's difficult. We would stand up and say, God, here I am. I'm yours to do with whatever you want when things are great and it's easy. And I'm willing to be obedient and do whatever you need when it's not easy, when it hurts. I'm willing to trust you above everything. God, I am yours. I am yours. Let that be the cry of our heart now. I pray these things in your name. Amen. Let's let them lead us on video.
Oh, we won't fear the battle, we won't fear the night. We will walk the valley with you by our side. You will go before us, you will lead the way. We have found a refuge only you can save. Oh, sing with joy now, our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. And raise your voice now, no love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us? Even when I stumble, oh, even when I stumble, even when I fall, even when I turn back, still your love is sure. You will not abandon, you will not forsake. You will cheer me onward with never-ending grace. Sing with joy, sing with joy now. Our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. Raise your voice now. No love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us? Neither height nor depth, and neither height nor depth can separate us. Hell and death will not defeat us. He who gave his Son to free us holds me in his love, and neither height nor depth can separate us. Hell and death will not defeat us. He who gave his Son to free us holds me in his love. Sing with joy, oh, sing with joy now. Our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. And raise your voice now, no love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us? Sing with joy now, our God is for us. The Father's love is a strong and mighty fortress. Raise your voice now, no love is greater. Who can stand against us if our God is for us?
That you just will let these these are big thoughts. These are big ideas. I pray that you just let them bounce around in your head. And if need be, get out your Bible this week. Go back and read these passages again. Go read Daniel chapter 3. Go read Jonah chapter 4. Go read 2 Corinthians chapter 4. And let these things kind of permeate and penetrate your heart and your mind. And let them be God. Let him be Lord of your life, okay? Couple things, guys. Community groups are starting back up this week. The new year has started. The winter break is over. So for the men's group that meets on Wednesday nights, it'll be this Wednesday night, 6:30 at Rib Crib. Hope to see you guys there. And then if you guys do the morning group, it'll be whatever time works for David on Friday morning. Okay, good. That means a little later. Nice. At the Bagel Cafe. So hope to see you guys there. Have a great week, everybody. And if you get the chance, you might say to Kim McDaniel, are you having a good day today? Because it's a special day. But I didn't say anything out loud. Have a great one, everybody. Bye.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday. Thank you.
It's coming?